Mr. Hughes, you referred just now to the priorities being burglary and car crime, and interestingly, we were told the same by our previous witnesses that when they came again and again with the child sexual exploitation in Rotherham, they were told, well, sorry, we're not going to deal with this because we're focused on burglary and car crime.
Awful.
Whose decision was that?
That's not a decision that they got from me. The responsibility is the protection of life and property, and burglary and car crime are identified by the community as being problems, and they're brought to the fore as priorities, and they're dealt with, but there's no diktat from the centre to say you can only investigate a particular category.
But weren't there government priorities set centrally at that time?
There were, but I'm not seeking to evade responsibility. I am not seeking to try and blame somebody else about things like targets being set. There is a lot of flexibility at a force and at a local level to set what's considered appropriate for a force.
So when these people were told that the police weren't going to deal with the child sexual exploitation because the focus was on burglary and car crime, what are you saying about that?
I say that is wrong, and they should not have been told such things.
But surely you were the chief constable of
yes, I was the chief constable,
and you've just told us those priorities were burglary and car crime.
There are a number of priorities over an extended period of time. They are priorities. They do not exclude important other crimes. And if a local priority, which clearly this was, for crime in Rotherham against people, it should always have been there on a priority list. It's not something you then suppress because you're going to investigate.
Talking about the child sexual exploitation in Rotherham, the chair asked you, I think, three times whether you were aware of any of this. And each of those 3 times you replied, I think with a carefully prepared, I suspect, phrase, that you weren't aware of its scale and scope. What were you aware of?
Child sexual exploitation exists all over the United Kingdom. And I saw it myself as a young police officer.
Can you ask we don't know the history of this. Okay. Mr. Reckless has asked you a specific question about your awareness, since we are concerned with you and not the history of what's happening nationally. Do you want him to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Would that be helpful? Mr. Reckless.
The chair 3 times said, are you aware of any of this? And 3 times you replied you were not aware of the scale and scope. What were you aware of?
I was aware of the fact that child sexual exploitation, the grooming of young people, exists all over the United Kingdom, and so offences will be everywhere.
But in South Yorkshire, burglary and car crime were greater priorities.
In terms of volume crime that you're dealing with, partly yes, at different times, different offences. I have never seen child sexual exploitation come to the fore as a priority above those.
Do you think relations grew too close, perhaps even too cosy, between South Yorkshire Police and some of the councils in the area, including Rotherham?
I didn't feel it was ever a cosy relationship. There were political difficulties in both Doncaster and Rotherham at the time. I thought it was a professional relationship. I worked hand in glove, I hope, with local councillors to put in place appropriate policing.
Yeah, I mean, my question is perhaps whether you should have been working hand in glove to the same extent with the local councillors, and in particular, when you received a report from someone working for Rotherham Council, setting out, I think, mapping the extent of child sexual exploitation around Rotherham. Was it appropriate that that was dealt with by a reference back to the chief executive of the council and a presumption that it might have been an employment?
I'm sorry, I don't know what report that is. I'm sorry, I'm not being difficult. I don't know what that document specifically is.
Yes, no, I mean, following the Home Office mandated pilot, and then when that work wasn't taken any further by the police, actually following the meeting where they were told burglary and car crime were the priorities, the researchers involved then mapped the extent of child sexual exploitation and reported it to South Yorkshire Police, and whoever was responsible in South Yorkshire Police, I'm not sure whether colleagues will remember whether we were told who individually that was, then actually just reverted that back to the chief executive at Rotherham Council and didn't investigate it.
Okay, if that had happened, it would not be appropriate. Okay. But I have no... I'm not quite sure what year it is
So you don't know about that, and you don't accept that relationships were too close and cosy with Rotherham and its councillors?
Delivering the reductions in crime overall over that period, which the South Yorkshire Police did with partners, requires close partnership working. It's almost invariably been positive. I think we're seeing somewhere where it was not so.
Yeah, but doesn't it also require investigating crimes when they're reported,
Crime has to be
rather than
investigated.
just referring to a partner and on their say not taking further action?
I would not support such behaviour. Crime needs to be investigated.
Okay. Can you just describe the process when you applied to be the Labour Party's candidate as Police and Crime Commissioner for South Yorkshire? What process did you go? Was there any scrutiny or initial interview, and who was involved in that?
I was invited to apply by a group of MPs who were concerned about the quality of the candidates they were getting, wanted to enhance the field. I think it's fair to say they didn't want me. I'm not vain. We were not interviewed as such. There was quite a list put together, and then I went through a series of different interviews with stakeholders, trade unions, and then a hustings process.
So you've got the trade unions. Were any Labour Rotherham councillors involved in that process?
There would have been. The hustings in Rotherham were almost full of
Rotherham
councillors and political figures from the Labour Party in Rotherham. Yes.
Doesn't that suggest that relationships were too cosy, and the Labour Party itself has something to answer for in terms of what its councillors in Rotherham did and how they worked with the police, including police that later applied to be Labour Party councillors?
It's a matter of record that I came bottom of the selection process, so I don't think it was that cosy. Can I just add one quick point? The relationship was never cosy in that regard, and I was never a political party member whilst a chief constable. I worked hard for 32 years so that nobody could tell my political background.
And was there an overly cosy Was there an overly cosy relationship at any point between South Yorkshire Police and the Pakistani community within Rotherham, and particularly Labour councillors from that Pakistani community?
I don't think so, certainly not on my part. I did seek to build good relationships with all minority communities across South Yorkshire. That does not extend to turning a blind eye to criminal offences.
Thank you. Well, it appears it did extend to that. The question is how that happened.
But not at my tiers. And in fact, one incident I do recall is when an imam is arrested for a specific offence and we have a major inquiry afterwards. So
you do remember something then?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, but not the scale and scope.
No, I don't.
And you won't go beyond that and tell us what you actually do?
I can't at this point. I'm trying to be honest.
So you don't remember anything, or you don't remember the scale and scope?
I do not remember the scale and scope. I am well aware of child sexual abuse across the whole of the
In South Yorkshire, were you aware of a specific and particular problem in Rotherham, and particularly involving the Pakistani community in Rotherham? Was that something you were aware of at any time in your service as Deputy and then Chief Constable of South Yorkshire? You're on oath already, Mr. Hughes. There's no need to...
I'm on oath. The report in 2010 is very clear about the scale and scope.
Mr. Reckless is asking about you.
Yes.
He's not asking about the report.
I knew from the report at that point.
But you knew nothing except from reading that one report in 2010?
That's the report I remember reading.
Is that really a credible position, Mr.
It's true, and I look forward to the inquiry.
I hope for you it is.
Yes, I understand.
Mr. Hughes, you say you look forward to the inquiry. This is an inquiry.
I look forward to it in that regard, sir.
This is a parliamentary inquiry. There's no such inquiry, that you look forward to in the future, as if that you can put off all your answers for some time in the future. We are seeking facts from you. That's why we put you on oath, and we will be producing our own report. Indeed. And conducting our own inquiry. So when Mr. Reckless puts a point to you, it is to get an answer now, not sometime in the future.
Chairman, I apologise. I'm not seeking to avoid answering your question. I'm seeking to be accurate.
Question 3 times, so I don't know whether you would like a final opportunity to answer it, or whether we're not going to get anything further.
Are we done? We don't remember anything.
Is that your position? I don't recall the scale and scope of the problems in Rotherham at that time. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Have you discussed that answer with professional advisors before coming here?
On Friday morning, I was in the Middle East. I've come back over the weekend, and I have appeared today.
And we're extremely grateful to you for coming back from the Middle East.